Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to this, our very first guest speakers for Digi.O 2020, which is an innovation that we are doing this year. And we are lucky to have a very interesting and engaging set of guest speeches this week. And this is the first one of them. And we have today Dr. Kate Hoffman and Dr. Robert Domanski that are actually reporting directly from the field. As you may know, New York City is one of the main hotspots right now for the pandemic all around the world. And then we are lucky to have Rob and Kate willing to come and share with us their experiences during this pandemic. And let me just, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I want to let you know a little bit more about the two of them. So Kate Hoffman is the Director of Research and Future Planning for the New York City Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. She leads research, planning, and reporting efforts related to emerging technologies and the role in the city government and across society. Kate has served in city government for over a decade in a variety of tech planning and implementation roles, with a particular focus on human and community interaction with tech and tech projects, equity, and inclusion. Outside of government, she has worked in a range of research and teaching roles in the private and nonprofit sectors. She holds a PhD in sociocultural anthropology from Columbia University, and she specializes in the experience and negotiation of social class in the contemporary United States. Rob Domanski, also a PhD. He is the Director of Higher Education for the New York City Mayor's Tech Talent Pipeline Industry Partnership. He oversees the CUNY 2x Tech Initiative, a $25 million investment in the City University of New York to double the university's number of computer science graduates by 2022. The initiative has the dual goals of economic development and workforce development, building the local pool of diverse tech talent to grow the New York City tech industry and connecting New Yorkers to high-quality tech jobs. Rob is also a former professor of both computer science and political science in the City University of New York system, and his academic research focuses on internet governance, hacktivism, and the politics of algorithms. He has more recently published in the specific subtopics of algorithmic bias and artificial intelligence from technical, policy, and ethical perspectives. So, thank you very much, Kate and Rob, for being with us today. And please go ahead with your presentation.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Rob, do you want to say anything before I start with my piece, just to introduce the session?
Sure. So as Luis very graciously introduced us, the two of us do work for the New York City government in different roles and on different teams, actually. And so our plan is to just share some of our experiences in response to the pandemic over the last 3 months or so. And Kate is going to start out by talking about some of what she's been working on, and then I will follow up after her with some of what I've been working on. So Kate, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you. Great, so I'm here for the Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer, and I'm going to talk today about a set of initiatives that we've been working on to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to particularly focus on a set of initiatives focused on digital access for vulnerable New Yorkers. Quickly before I go through those initiatives, I wanted to just give a little bit of an introduction about our office. We work across 4 teams and work areas to broadly use technology and innovation to make New York City future ready. And our mission is really substantively focused around equity and inclusion in terms of access to technology, use of technology, and deployment of technology. we really view technology as a critical area of focus for meeting the mayor's broad goal of making New York City the fairest big city in the US. So the 4 areas are universal broadband, where we're working to bring high quality, affordable, and safe internet service to all New Yorkers. A digital services team, where we're building digital tools and services to make government work better for everyone. An innovation team that is engaging with communities and the private sector to introduce and test new ideas to improve New Yorkers' lives. And then a tech policy and planning team, where we're working to advance plans and policies that to bring about good technologies and good technology use for New Yorkers. So since the COVID-19 pandemic has hit, we've been working to support the city's response efforts in a variety of ways. I have here just a random sampling of some of the work that we've been doing, but broadly we're working to support other city agencies, create new services for New Yorkers, and we've also released some toolkits targeted toward serving some emerging immediate needs. The initiatives that I'm going to focus on, as I said, are those related to providing digital access to vulnerable New Yorkers, and particularly a few that I've been personally most involved in. And this work ties into broader efforts that have been underway in our office for a number of years under the universal broadband vertical that I mentioned. In January of this year, we released the city's first ever Internet Master Plan, which broadly frames our goals for the next generation of internet technology. It identifies the kinds of partnerships and infrastructure that will be required to meet those goals, and it really sets a course for closing the digital divide in New York City. That plan highlights some of the stark disparities that exist today in broadband access, and some of those I've highlighted at the top of this slide. So 40% of New York City households lack the combination of home internet, home broadband, and mobile broadband, and we consider that combination to be really what's required to be digitally included today. Over 1.5 million New Yorkers have neither of those types of connections at home, and then almost half of New York City households living in poverty don't have broadband access at home. So it's really, there are some big challenges, and it's a big task for us broadly. When COVID hit, that challenge, became quite particularly urgent, as home internet access has proved to be really an even more essential service. We already knew it was essential for full participation in social and economic life, and under COVID, it's become, really required for safe access to healthcare, continuation of education, of employment, access to government services, critical government services, and basic connections to family and friends. And we've also seen, of course, during the pandemic that there's been a great deal of overlap in the communities that lack these critical digital resources and those that have been hardest hit by the pandemic. And so in order to respond to that urgent need, we've been working quickly to spin up a set of initiatives to rapidly support access to devices and internet and support for their use in vulnerable communities, building on that Internet Master Plan and some of the work that we had already underway. And much of this work is tied into Mayor de Blasio's Equity Action Plan to combat COVID at the New York City Housing Authority as well. So the first specific initiative I'll cover is called Connected NYCHA Older Adults. Older adults, and particularly low-income seniors, we know they're already very vulnerable to lacking digital access. We also know, of course, that they're particularly susceptible and vulnerable in the COVID environment. And they also are, because of those factors, likely to be homebound for a particularly long period of time, even as things reopen because of their risk factors. And so we've outlined a program and delivered a program, really. In the last month, we've geared up and distributed 10,000 free connected tablets with wraparound support to seniors living in public housing citywide. We have these, the device that we've distributed here is a 10-inch Android tablet. It comes with unlimited data service, 4G LTE data service for a year, all free to the end user. We've kitted these devices with the end user in mind and preloaded some key apps and shortcuts that we know that they'll need to use. And then we've also contracted with a nonprofit provider through the Department for the Aging to offer, as I said, wraparound supports. So these seniors are all getting outbound calls by that provider to bring them into a support environment. They're getting access to a hotline for inbound calling for the life of the program. They're getting a wide variety of virtual training programs online and access to static online tools and resources as well. And then we're working to also offer some trainings through this nonprofit to build capacity of local community organizations across the city to really build that network of support for the seniors. So for example, many of our senior center providers are participating in that capacity building training so that they can build their own virtualized programs and services and enhance that support broadly. Our partners on this have been T-Mobile, the Housing Authority, as I said, the Department for the Aging, and then this nonprofit Older Adults Technology Services, also known as Senior Planet. And I've included here just a quote from one of the users that really illustrates, the way in which this is a sort of a fundamental resource for these seniors at this time. This resident said, "When I got the tablet, I didn't realize how lonesome I was without visits from my children. It's like a connection to the outside without the fear of catching the virus. The tablet brings you closer to people without physical contact." The next initiative that we have rolled out is a universal solicitation for broadband NYCHA. We're also calling this the NYCHA Rapid Response Requests for Expressions of Interest. So this is really tied to our Internet Master Plan, where we outlined an intention to release a set of solicitations related to implementing against that plan. And this is the first release related to that. In this RFEI, we're trying to identify ready to deploy or pilot projects that will expand free or low-cost internet service to public housing residents. We're open to a wide variety of solutions and models and a wide variety of partners here. We're looking for new products and pricing, new service options and discounted rates for public housing, free Wi-Fi solutions that are accessible to folks in their apartments, and then other innovative approaches using established or emerging technologies. And we're really open to a wide variety of partners here and to partnerships among different kinds of entities, internet service providers, community groups, and others. This was released late last month, and we're accepting applications on that through the end of June. We're working in partnership there with the New York City Economic Development Corporation and the Housing Authority again. And then the last initiative, Connected Communities. So this is work that we have been doing for many years to coordinate public computer centers and digital literacy training that's available across a wide variety of city entities. We operate the largest system of public computer centers and digital literacy programs in the country across over 500 libraries, senior centers, and community centers. Under normal conditions, these centers offer a wide array of resources. They offer the basic computers and internet service, but also knowledgeable staff, varied software, language and disability access tools, and then some advanced, in addition to that basic equipment that I mentioned, also, varied advanced equipment like 3D printers, digital media production equipment, et cetera. And then these centers also offer over 2,500 hours a week of digital literacy training program, digital skills training programs broadly. And those are really varied as well. Everything from a basic, how to turn on your computer and use your mouse, to courses in coding, in design, in civic engagement, media literacy, et cetera. And so all of these centers have closed now under COVID, which is a huge loss for New Yorkers in terms of access to these resources. We know that these centers are particularly relied upon by people who don't have internet access at home. And of course, this is a primary resource for digital literacy and for support for internet use. And so as those centers have closed, we've been working across the city with those partners to support their continued provision of services and programs through sort of new adaptations of their work, such as new technical support models, hotline-based support, or one-on-one, other kinds of one-on-one text-based support, virtualization of a variety of different kinds of programs, new kinds of static online resources, and then professional development and other kinds of capacity building for these organizations to support this kind of virtualized work, among other things that are still in development. And our partners here are all of the city's 3 library systems: Brooklyn Public Library, Queens Public Library, New York Public Library, as well as our Department for the Aging, our Department of Youth and Community Development, our Parks Department, and our Housing Authority. And these are just some links for further reading on some of these initiatives and other documents that I referenced. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Kate. And it's to my understanding that we're going to be doing a brief Q&A at the end of this. So that's terrific. Again, I'm Rob Domansky. I work as Director of Higher Education for the Mayor's Tech Talent Pipeline Industry Partnership. And so where that sits within the city government is we sit within the Department of Small Business Services. And during the pandemic, small businesses have been severely hit and impacted. And so within our agency, we've had certainly a bit of an all hands on deck kind of mentality of, regardless of what people's traditional roles or their job description might happen to be, as the city has identified specific, needs or services or things we can do to assist not only small businesses, but New Yorkers in general. We've been pulled onto various teams and various projects to work together to do as much as we can do to support everyone out there. So that's the broader context. I could tell you within TTP, the Tech Talent Pipeline, we have 2 goals simultaneously, right? We are an industry partnership. So we work with the tech industry within the city, the Googles and Microsofts, et cetera, that have a presence in New York. And we work with the tech industry for economic development purposes, right? We want to work with industry partners and find ways of supporting them and growing the tech industry at large. So that's one stream. The other stream we work on simultaneously is workforce development. We want to grow New York City's tech industry so that we can connect more New Yorkers to local tech jobs, right? And so we do a lot with workforce development, with training. Again, my specific role is as Director of Higher Education is I work with the City University system, which is a major source of the future workforce in the tech sector. Kate, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Thank you. So just at a high level, so SBS, Small Business Services, as well as the Tech Talent Pipeline, we have really been doing a ton of things. I'm only going to speak to what I have personally either worked on directly or have had some tangential work involved and am aware of what's going on, but this is by no means an exclusive list of what we've been up to. This is just what I could speak to directly myself. So in response to the impacts of the pandemic, a big thing that SBS is doing is looking to find ways of supporting job seekers in this fundamentally altered economic landscape, right? Between massive layoffs and unemployment rates that we haven't seen in decades, we are looking to support job seekers any way that we can. And a lot of that is even looking to the future a bit in the short term. A lot of folks who who find themselves now unemployed are going to be spending the next few weeks, if not months, looking to upskill, right? Looking to build their skill set, make them, good job candidates going forward. And so one of the things we've worked on is creating a workforce training portal. We've done this not only for upskilling like tech skills among the workforce, but also doing it across a range of industries, everything from manufacturing, industrial, you name it. So we've created this brand new portal to kind of put instructional materials online for self-learners who want to either reinforce skills they've had and update their skill set, or actually learn new skills entirely to make themselves marketable in spaces maybe they hadn't been before. So that's one thing. If we look at the second category here, something else we're trying to do in a big way is support businesses both during the shutdown as well as now that they're planning for reopening. So initially, when the COVID pandemic hit, the city did provide small business loans and grants, and there was an enormous demand for that. After the initial wave where the city was providing those small business loans and grants, then the city was trying to help small businesses connect to the federal funds that became available through a federal program. And we created everything from loan repayment calculators to assist businesses that were trying to figure out what was the best fit, to really just filling out forms and trying to connect them to the right type of loan or grant and see who's eligible, and create different technological tools to assist them on this front. That was initially. More recently, as we're really focused on the reopening at the moment, so New York City just had their phase 1 reopening of businesses this past Monday. And so one of the things that we saw as important was that, small businesses are being required to provide certain PPE equipment to their workers. So for instance, small businesses can reopen so long as they provide face masks to their employees, and they're required to do so. And so there's a hotline that was set up for businesses. And one of the things that was coming in was a lot of requests of, we as a business want to provide our employees with this PPE equipment, but we're having a hard time finding suppliers. And so what I'm still in the middle of working on, but it's about ready to launch now, is a PPE online marketplace where we list suppliers and manufacturers of this type of equipment in the city, and to businesses in need of finding that equipment, it's just an easy way to connect the two and see and make sure that they can find what is needed and also see what's available. In the third category here, again, I work for an industry partnership. So we do always a lot of work talking to industry partners to constantly get their feedback and collect up-to-date information about where industry stands, what they're thinking on a variety of topics. So again, in this employment landscape, as one example, we have weekly conversations with industry partners, especially the tech industry personally, where we have engaging them from the beginning of the pandemic on changing employment demand, right? Are you still hiring? What are the specific roles you're hiring for? What are the skills that right now are still in demand, if not more so in demand? And which ones are at least temporarily falling out of favor? They're not as in demand at the moment. So we gather a ton of industry feedback based on what they need, what they're looking for. And then we use that to shape some of our decision-making on the workforce front. So that's number one. Number two is SBS has created, and really the city has created, several industry-specific business advisory councils. So there is a tech advisory council. There's also really in so many industries. I know there's one on entertainment and tourism. And again, the idea here is getting feedback, getting input constantly from the various industries with a strong presence in New York City to make sure that our efforts are aligned with what they need. And the third here is, again, this is something we put together at TTP, which is we saw this as an opportunity to create some stronger bridges between the tech sector and what is actually needed in government to some degree. And so we reached out to all of our industry partners and created a pool of tech industry volunteers that these individuals, these software engineers and developers, were willing to volunteer to contribute to different COVID-related public service projects, whether it's creating various websites like the PPE online marketplace I described, or the workforce training portal, or the loan repayment calculator. We actually have been trying to connect the tech professionals locally to assist wherever they're able to or willing to with some of these needs that the government has. And we actually see that as it has several potential long-term benefits as well of creating closer connections among the tech industry and government and tech industry and university system. So that's ongoing too. And then finally, the last category on this sheet is, and again, this is something I work on very directly during the pandemic, working with academic institutions to support their role in the upcoming economic rebuild. So number one, at the outset of the pandemic, when all of the colleges and universities migrated online to virtual environments, we, of course, at CUNY, the City University of New York system, there were thousands of students that did not have whether laptops, whether broadband at home in order to complete their courses and do what was required there. So one of the things that we helped work on was getting the funding and helping procure 50,000 laptops to the City University students. Okay, those are laptops directly to students. This is on, again, I work in higher education, but this is in addition to over 300,000 devices that the city put towards K-12 students, which are the pre-university level. So hardware and broadband certainly is, it was a big push just in order to support the students and the New Yorkers that needed them. In addition to that, on the higher ed front, so we have a tech-specific academic council that is citywide. It involves over 30 different colleges and universities within the city. And we have been moving towards getting their input, their feedback, not only initially what was needed to get through this current semester during the pandemic and quarantine, but also now looking forward to especially next year, where there's still a lot of uncertainty if classes will remain remote or whether they'll return to being in person. We are looking to get feedback from the presidents and provosts of those colleges and universities to see what they're thinking, if, you know, to see what their needs are, what are their expected demands or shortfalls, and see in what ways the city might be able to help support them and address them. In other cases, it's very interesting. In some cases, different colleges and universities, there's opportunities for them to support each other based on what their needs are. So we're putting efforts towards that. And then finally, again, as I'm sure a lot of the audience at DGO or the DGS can attest to, the emergency migration to online learning is really unprecedented, especially on the scale. And so one of the things TTP has done is launched a comprehensive research study on this migration to virtual learning that was done on short notice with little to no pre-planning. We really stress, as we're coming across all the data, that it really should not be seen as an experiment of online virtual learning in general, like the pros and cons of it, because of the suddenness in which it took place. With that said, there are a lot of potential insights that we can, gain from about online learning from what happened over the last 3 months in the virtual realm. And so we're looking to do that on a scale that, again, is not unique to one field or even one college or university, but really the entire New York university system. So those are a lot of the ways, though again, not an exclusive list, of things that we've been working on in response to the pandemic. And Kate, thank you. And just finally, just being somewhat familiar with the audience with DGS, some things as potential takeaways at a high level that just might be interesting. As we talk about digital government initiatives, again, as Kate and I are practitioners working in the field, on the ground, so to speak, some very on-the-ground type challenges that I know I can attest to that I think sometimes go overlooked, this kind of granular level of challenge. So number one, at the Department of Small Business Services, where I am, as a result of the pandemic, our commissioner of the agency was actually pulled to pandemic-specific response. And so we actually have a brand new commissioner, and this turnover just happened a few weeks ago. And so we have entirely new leadership at the very top of our agency, which does kind of change some of the internal dynamics. Also, when it comes to challenges we're facing on a daily level is budget uncertainty. Not only are there different funding streams between federal level, state level, city level, but really in response to everything that's been happening at a macro level, budgets are very much up in the air. And so there's that uncertainty really drives a lot of decision making as well. There's a fundamentally altered landscape in which we operate. Again, we do a lot with economic development and workforce development, and everything has been so sudden that we're constantly trying to figure out where things stand, right? What does economic development, what does workforce development even mean today as opposed to a month ago, which is not typically a long amount of time. So it's shifting sand under our feet that we're trying to maintain our finger on the pulse. Also, again, just at a very granular level, the types of challenges that we've encountered, for instance, at SBS, at our agency, some of our own employees have actually come down with COVID, and some of our partners, both in industry and also at the universities, also have come down with COVID. And, it really is something not only on a human level that is upsetting, but it also leads to a lot of questions in terms of work that's either underway or that we'd be looking to do. And then, of course, current events. For those of you who, I assume everyone knows this to some extent, but internationally, I'm a little less certain. We've had roughly 2 weeks of mass protests in New York City. And that also has been not only driving a lot of the agenda, at least over the last week or two, but also it's something that when we're formulating priorities and what resources should go in what direction, it's definitely top of mind. I know we're running short on time, so I'll try to be brief, but again, it's sort of on a daily level. I think those of us as city employees, we've been trying to simultaneously deal with, number one, the urgent triage directly related to the pandemic, like how to support New Yorkers and businesses just in the face of what's happening with the pandemic, right? That's number one, and that always has a huge sense of urgency. Number two is, as a result of the pandemic, we're trying to figure out what to do with our existing programs and activities, right? For instance, I could tell you I work on a massive citywide internship program for university students. And the funding was all of a sudden became a question, and also companies decided to start canceling en masse a lot of internship opportunities they had already committed to. So the questions came up like, well, here's an existing program, and yet what do we do to preserve it to whatever extent we can? What changes can we make to it to keep it existing and get the benefits from it? But that has also taken up a lot of, I think, time and energy. In addition to preserving existing programs, we've had to spend a lot of time and effort on planning new programs and activities, so being a little forward-looking. And we all, I think, have our wish list of things that we'd like to get off the ground, and we're still trying to put those together, but also it's competing with some of the other things on this list. And then finally, long-term strategies. I know to some extent the DGS audience really thinks of a lot of research has been done on the long term on major initiatives like smart cities initiatives and things along those lines. Those are still conversations that are being had, and we have questions of to what extent does everything happening over the last few months alter what those strategies should be. In some cases, are there new opportunities emerging? In other cases, how does this highlight that some of what we might have thought was worthy of a major investment or pursuit might not be the case anymore? So we have all those things happening simultaneously. And at a very high level, just two very quick takeaways at the bottom here. Digital government initiatives, they don't exist in a vacuum. They really, at least through my experience, they do exist as part of broader agency goals. And so when an idea surfaces of a really interesting digital government initiative, right, that alone is not enough to make it happen, right? And this is, again, just from living it. It needs to be for a specific purpose. Modernization is not enough of a purpose, generally. The very first question with any new idea is, who is this helping, right? Is it a problem we're actually trying to solve, or is it something else? And so really it's digital government initiatives to what end, right? To what purpose? And that's something that really is, I think, a major determining factor that shouldn't be overlooked. And then finally, in competition for resources of various types, not only at the agency level, but even, again, on small team and individual levels, right, where a lot of decision-making occurs. So, for instance, personally, if I have, a limited bandwidth this week, and I'm looking at the 4 listed needs I need to simultaneously address, even when it's a matter of making decisions over how to spend my time, like what is most urgent, what is top priority, without losing sight of the big picture. I think those decisions are maybe like the most important thing in terms of what ends up getting done. And I think my big takeaway personally going through this day to day is it's not necessarily always the merit of the idea that, in a digital government sense, that is the determining factor. It really is competing priorities that all need to be addressed to the largest extent possible. But again, it's a resource constraint that explains, I think, what the outputs look like. I'm going to stop there. That's all I have. Kate, just in terms of any additional final insights or high-level takeaways, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've really covered a lot of the things that we are contending with also. I think, I would just emphasize that in our case, it has been really helpful that we happened to just finish this major planning effort around connectivity right before this happened. And so we were really well positioned because we had done all of that research and groundwork to start to respond to this immediate need very quickly and with, I think, well-designed and effective sort of models that I think you've covered. So some of the key challenges, I would agree with what you said.
So with that, I think we are finished, but we're very happy to answer any questions any of you might have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you very much, Rob. And then, well, we have opened the floor for questions. So I can see some of you, but for sure, I can see if you raise your hands here in the panel.
This is Vishwa.
Go ahead, Vishwa.
I can begin. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I joined in the middle of the presentation, but I got some good insights there. So while I am a part-time PhD student, I also work with the New York State ITS team. And one of our collaboration efforts is with the New York City. So one of the questions I have was for the homeless shelters during this pandemic, and I think, Kate, you work in the MOX team. So the question, maybe you can answer it. How was the situation handled for these homeless citizens?
So we haven't actually undertaken any initiatives in that regard within our shop. We've been in regular conversation with folks who are addressing that issue and thinking about how that challenge. But unfortunately, I can't speak directly about those initiatives.
Okay.
Sorry, I'd be happy to follow up and try to connect you with someone who can talk further about that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Hi, this is Xiaoyi. Thanks for your presentation. And I have two questions and one for each of you. And the first one is for Kate about your project. And I was wondering, is the project include any design for collecting feedback from those users who got the digital devices? And will that be part of the project? And also how whether those feedbacks will affect maybe like the refinement or the future plan of the implementation of those digital devices?
Yeah, great. I appreciate that question. Yes, short answer, yes. There are two distinct efforts underway in that regard. One, we did some introductory user research, and that quote that I presented was something that was gathered as part of that effort through our digital services team to understand sort of the rollout as it was happening, the early rollout. So I was focused on, what people's experience was like enrolling, what their experience was like with the delivery, the unboxing, and sort of initial sort of getting started piece. And that's been helpful. That was helpful to us in terms of making some adjustments along the way, and certainly would be helpful to us in terms of thinking about the deployment itself for any future device distribution initiatives, which is definitely a live conversation ongoing. And then additionally, we're going to be working in collaboration with our nonprofit partner, Older Adults Technology Services and the Department for the Aging, to do a broader evaluation of the program. This is a really great opportunity, we think, because we're in a position to really understand the relationship between the support that we're offering and the utilization of the resources we're providing. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely tracking on an ongoing basis utilization of the support pieces and utilization of the devices at a very general level, just sort of at the data consumption level. And then we'll be doing some interaction with the end users as well to understand sort of more qualitatively what their experience has been like and how we might take some lessons from this effort to other similar projects.
Thanks for the feedback. And I have another question for Robert. Actually, before your last slides, I was going to ask you what are the challenges that you have encountered during your, with all those things going on, but you already tell us a little bit of the challenge during the process. So I'm wondering, what do you see as either personal level or organizational level, what do you see as the key to help you better adapt or address those challenges?
Sure, it's a good question. I would say at this stage, again, we're 3 months in, and with the city just beginning its phase 1 reopening this past day, right now, not only mine, but our team's attention really is very focused on the reopening and what obstacles are there, not only from a public health perspective, but other types of supports, technological supports or otherwise that New Yorkers need, as well as what businesses need. And we're approaching it in terms of what is urgently needed, what's a top priority, but also what is something that would add value to the longer term picture, right? So on the workforce development side, when we're trying to, curate and share a whole lot of instructional type materials so that workers can potentially upskill themselves during the pandemic, we see this as having value that will go beyond, the immediate term. And so I think that's also a pretty big influencing factor, both individually and also at like a broader level in terms of what we prioritize and how we determine the value of any activity that we might consider pursuing.
Okay, thanks for your feedback.
Perfect. Any other questions? Andrea.
Yeah, I'd love to ask. This is really directed at Kate. If I understood your, program with the outreach, it's really fascinating, and I'm very curious. So you've essentially distributed tablets, as I understand it, but I'm just very interested in the role of the mobile phone in these people's lives, because if I understood correctly, these are lower income families. And I'm just wondering if you could speak for a few minutes about what you know about them, or when you were recruiting them, or how you recruited them. I know you're working with these different organizations that work with them, which is perfect. In my personal opinion, it's the way to go. So you're distributing tablets. Are you somehow providing Wi-Fi? How do they get connected? If you're providing Wi-Fi, or you're providing routers and you're paying for the Wi-Fi, or is it tablets with data plan? And why not just mobile? Just make sure they all have mobile phones. Do they already have mobile phones already? Did you know that, and so on? Thank you.
Okay, I'll see if I can remember all of those questions. In terms of how we selected participants and what we knew about what resources they had in place, this was an initiative that was part of the Mayor's Equity Action Plan for COVID response at NYCHA, at our housing authority. And so we knew we were going to be selecting folks in the housing authority. We knew, there was a particularly pronounced need for older adults, so we thought it was really important to focus an initial effort there. We chose in the program. There were a set of developments that were particularly prioritized as being both sort of seeing that confluence of being hard hit by the virus and being particularly at a disadvantage in terms of digital access. Ultimately it was broadened out as we did the enrollment, but initially we did focus in those areas, and also we focused on seniors who were likely to be more socially isolated, so seniors living alone or seniors living with another senior. And we didn't unfortunately know much about those particular residents' existing resources. That's something that we're going to be asking about when we do our evaluation, just to understand how, what the outcomes are like for folks who had different kinds of resources coming in. We do have some citywide data about, mobile phone and mobile internet service, mobile phone service, but we didn't have any specific data about these particular residents. What else? And it does, the offer is a tablet that comes connected to data service, unlimited data service. So they have the internet access directly, and it's wireless. It's a mobile data plan. So there's no need to install equipment in the apartments, etc. I think that was all your questions, but let me know if I missed something.
Yeah, that's essentially it. And there's such accessibility to the mobile phone and help. Other people have mobile phones that they know in their social network that they can get help, but their network is not likely to have tablets. So it's harder for them to just say, oh, how did you get that? Or where did you store that? Or how did you take a picture? Or whatever, right? But with phones, anyway, it's a very interesting area, and I love that you're working on it, and you should have some very interesting findings. And I'm very, very, very impressed by what Rob is describing, and what you're trying to accomplish, and especially under these circumstances, it's really impressive. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. I did also just want to, the thing that I didn't answer is why we chose tablets for this population. And that was really through our conversations with the Department for the Aging and with this nonprofit partner who we've been working with for many years. and their insight that for an older adult population that tablets or Chromebooks would be the most meaningful intervention in terms of really being able to integrate all of the kinds of services and tools that they might need, both in the immediate COVID environment and then on an ongoing basis. And then we also felt, part of that was that we felt it was important to have a larger screen for vision and dexterity issues that may come into play. So a variety of factors there, yeah. And part of it is also, sort of to Rob's point earlier, there's budget and procurement constraints as well. So that always plays into, you know, the particular selection of devices that you can make.
Thank you. So do we have another question from the audience? Go ahead, Thora.
Okay, and I have two questions. And the first question is research about older adults adopting technologies. And what I would like to know is, have you experienced any issues with that particular population in introducing those devices? And the second question is, how is the city factoring privacy and security into the deployment plan? Because we know that this devices collects a lot of personal data.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. On the privacy and security front, like we were keenly aware of that issue, and we did work in negotiating our contract for the devices. The devices and the service are both purchased from T-Mobile. So we were able to negotiate terms to ensure, and we were also able to kit the devices. You know, the presets are sort of maximizing privacy. So there was work that we did in that regard. There's also our nonprofit parts, data security training in their offerings. And so they have some dedicated programs focused on that, and it's a piece of a lot of the different kinds of programs that they offer as well. I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question again?
The first part of the question was about adoption. Any resistance in that particular population in terms of, okay, having to learn using these new devices, or any challenges that they may have?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, we felt it was critical to layer in this wraparound support piece because, you know, while we recognize that there will be there's a diversity in this population in terms of what people's experience and skill levels are, we knew that, you know, it was likely that there would be that support would be needed to really adopt use and to really support full use. You know, it's early days. I think we've seen, I guess, just a couple of insights so far. You know, a lot of folks we're serving they're being brought into this formal support environment that we've set up, but they're also citing an intent or an ongoing engagement with a family member, somebody already in their life to provide that support, which was, you know, something that we knew would probably be the case, right? We had a lot of people when we we did like some initial surveying in the onboarding calls, and folks are kind of not in a rush to get started using their tablets in many cases, and in many cases they're citing, I'm waiting for my family member, you know, my son or daughter, other family member is going to help me get set up, that kind of thing. And then we did have some particular challenges, just, you know, smaller details, things that we didn't know would be in place. Like, for example, we learned during the deployment that SIM cards were pre-installed in the tablets when they were mailed out to the residents, but there was included a little punch-out, plastic punch-out that the SIM card was in, and there was confusion about whether there was a SIM card or wasn't a SIM card, we had a number of support calls related to that. I don't have a SIM card. They got this little plastic insert that that was empty, and they thought that they were missing something. So there were some small details like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm sure that there's so many more questions, but we are out of time for the session today. So I just want to say once more, thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much, Kate, for this very interesting presentation. And thank you very much for all the efforts that you are making to continue providing services to all the people in New York City. This is really amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
For having us. Our pleasure.